To see Richard. Do you get Richard and Andrew? We just go Richard, but Richard's very, very young. Andrew's does more than maths, the geometry course, perspective, and one because Richard used to work in physics. Now full relation.
Okay. Okay. So. So what follows is first quite a detailed analysis by Golding of the Hegelian philosophical move that the regulatory position themselves against. But I don't want to get into this with you now, not because it is uninteresting or irrelevant, but because I just want to get closer to the question of the attunement and what does it really mean to listen to a work of art. So I'm going to really go quite, to just pick certain elements from this text and I leave it for you to read it properly and fill the gaps. It took me, I don't know, 3 or 4 times to read this essay before I felt that I got the hang of it. But once I understood it, it became incredibly useful. And I could see how it could be used and how it could work in different in some contexts. So we already mentioned Hegel a little bit. So let's see if the following will make a bit of sense. Let's go to page 6 in this version. And by the way, maybe before I ask Luke to read a few more lines, did you notice the size of the footnotes in this thing? Yeah. But not right now, not for the research paper you're going to do, but if you're going to write a PhD, that's how you're going to write. You're going to have more than half a page of footnotes. You will have more footnotes than actual text. Yeah, there is something very interesting in the way the footnote allows you to have 2 conversations going on the same page at once. The main conversation of the text and the conversation that develops through the footnotes. Sometimes it happens that the footnotes are the more interesting part. You know, it's only called a footnote, but it also might be. It sometimes happens that the most interesting ideas, the most interesting suggestions, and the greatest provocation all happen there. So don't, when you read it, don't overlook the footnotes. They are quite important here. Let's read from page 6 in the end to the question.
To the question, then, what can be added in order to avoid tautology, whim, outside direction, or authorial opinion? Hegel's answer is quite clear. He names it the negative, the immanent teleological surface, unfolding of dialectical synthesis itself. This may seem surprising, but this move to situate the is as a negative surface structure was quite an advance from the original zero-sum position of thesis plus antithesis. Just a bit. Equals the whole of the universe.
Yeah. What does it mean? Do you get anything out of this, or is it completely, you know, it doesn't make any sense? No, it doesn't make any sense. Okay, good. So you see, yeah, because you know we jumped into the middle of things. We didn't really follow the argument.
But she was kind of positioning, like you said, positioning Hegel's thing about what what is, and
Yeah.
he can have anything from
So what
outside.
Hegel says about the is, how Hegel names the is. The question is always, what is the question? What is the question? The question. The question is,
What is?
no, no. This is not your question.
Okay.
Your question is how change happens. How do you make something change? Yeah? So, it doesn't really matter what is it that you want to change. Let's say you want to change your fitness. You want to, you can barely walk to the bus stop, but you want to run half a marathon. Yeah? Okay. So, you want to change. The question then becomes, how do you make that change happen? Yeah? So you need to know how to make that happen, because if you don't, you will never get there. Yeah? There are different ways to get to run half a marathon. There are different ways to do it. Yeah? But there has to be a way to make change happen. Yeah? If you don't figure that out, you're never going to figure out how to make an artwork. Because artwork is always change. Artwork is always change from the previous state of events or situations. What does it mean to be an artist? In the traditional sense, to be an artist is to take everyday materials and give them an unusual form. Yeah, that's basically what an artist does. Everyday materials might be paints, might be canvas, might be stone, might be wood. Why they're everyday? Because they're ubiquitous. You use paint to paint your house. You use wood to make a bowl. You use stone to, to build an altar or a road. The artist uses the same materials, but gives them, uses them in an unusual way, in a different way. Yeah. In a traditional sense, that's the role of the artist. In a more contemporary sense, artists not so much work with materials as they work with processes. They take familiar, everyday processes and use them in a different way. Yeah, that's one way you could think about it. In either case, the question of change and how you make something change becomes really important. So that's why the question of change is also the key political question. Whatever, as I told you last week, whatever resistance movement, whatever political movement you want to be involved in, the question will always be, how do you make change happen? Yeah. And of course, most political arguments are precisely about that. How do you change the government, for instance? So there are several forms of change that are available to you. You can start from education. You can start from writing in newspapers. You can send letters to the editor. You can organize a party. You can organize a military resistance. The question is always how change happens. So Hegel had his own answer to this. He said, change happens via the negative. The negative causes the change. So if you want to, the noun for Hegel is the negative. Yeah? That is the moment of the present. And for that reason, the Hegelian philosophy is so fantastically useful if you really want to set up a political movement. Because it tells you that you need to find a way to harness the power of the negative. That is the story, very briefly. Hegel's answer, as you see here in the second line, Hegel's answer is quite clear. He names it the negative, the immanent teleological surface unfolding, the immanent teleological surface unfolding of dialectical synthesis itself. So the question is, another question which is always comes back is, what is the surface made of? What the surface is made of right now? Now, if you remember one of the Tuesday lectures a few weeks back, we said that Foucault, talking about after the Second World War years, from 40s to 60s, he was saying, well, the surface was made of Marxism, psychoanalysis, and semiotics. That was the surface. The question of change and the question of the surface are closely linked. So, for Hegel, the surface is the negative. What does it mean? And what is the advantage of this Hegelian model? Hegel created a philosophical system that is inherently restless and dynamic. It's restlessness. It's kind of dynamo. You know that sort of dynamo you have on your bike that generates electricity by movement? The dynamo of the system is the negative. The surface is always the negative. It's always the tension between what is present and what is absent. It's always the tension between me being here right now and me not being here in the future. It's this tension that creates my sense of self as this negative. Yeah? That is incredibly powerful, seductive idea, because it really tells you how to change. Change happens through negation. However, and there is always however, for Deleuze and Guattari, this approach is a worry. Yeah, no, Deleuze and Guattari write, 150 years after Hegel. A lot of water was used in the time, in the meantime. And Hegelian model now appears incredibly rigid and hinges, because it hinges on the rational, logical movement of the negative. Because where the negative really happens, where is the negative, where the negative lives, where is it domesticated, where is it domiciled? Well, it's domiciled in the mind. Yeah, it's a logical. It's a form of logic. That's what the negative is. The negative is not in the world, so to speak. It is in the mind. For that reason, for Hegel, the mind or the spirit is the world, because the negative is the surface. Where is the negative? It is a logical position. Logic is the world. Yeah. So that is beautiful, convincing, completely harmonious. Nothing is left out, and it's totally logical. Well, because it's all about the logic. It's a totally logical model. The problem is that it is kind of totalizing. It doesn't allow any room for whatever it is, whatever there is outside of this logical constant. As you remember, Hegel's famous expression is, what is rational is real, and what is real is rational. Rational is the mind, is the logical, yeah? Whatever is real is logical. Whatever is logical is real. Okay. Don't forget that the logical is also how the visual image operates and establishes itself, at least since the 14th century, since the Renaissance. The visual image makes its claim on the basis of this logical representation, and that's what causes it to be real. Yeah. So these things, you can see how these things are connected. Yes.
Question. So, if the negative is in the mind, and the mind is the world, the real,
Yes.
and there's no outside allowed, then the only change that can occur within the negative is recursive. It's not going to be any real
That's
change.
correct. And that's correct. And that will be one of the arguments that the Rosengotari will put forward. They basically will say there is change. The change is precisely the recursive nature of the negative. That's the rhythm. We will get to that. So, let's see. Let's take a few more lines from this. Can you read from here? From where you just stopped? This
And this may seem surprising.
yeah.
This may seem surprising, but this move to situate the is as a negative surface structure was quite an advance from the original zero-sum position of thesis plus antithesis equals the whole universe. For not only did establishing the negative as an immanent and unnameable something other allow for breaking up and adding to an otherwise deadlocked and tautological A is not A identity formation, it also meant that the so-called deep cut / between thesis...
No, this is the deep cut.
Yeah.
This is the deep cut.
The / should I use that word? Yeah. Deep cut / between thesis / antithesis could now no longer be envisioned as a logical no man's land.
You see, it's the way we need to read it is this. It also meant that the so-called deep cut, which is this, between thesis, deep cut, antithesis. Yeah, that's the deep cut. The deep cut is this. Yeah, what is the deep cut? What do you hear in the notion of the deep cut?
Severance or separation.
It's between what and what?
Or between something that was obviously united or at one point.
What? Yeah, good. But what and what is separated by the deep cut?
All there is and all there isn't.
Good. Okay. What else? Subject and object. Yeah. Or representation and the means of representation. Yeah. This is separated by this deep cut. That is very important concept because before Hegel, this deep cut was the kind of no man's land, like a sort of bomb site. Yeah. Uninhabited divide between the subjective and the objective, between the cogito in the Cartesian sense, the I think, and the world. Yeah, the deep cut. With Hegel, this deep cut gets filled with the negative. The negative becomes the deep cut. So let's read one more line, please.
It also meant that the so-called deep cut between thesis, deep cut, antithesis could now no longer be envisioned as a logical no man's land, i.e. as the excluded middle, often wrongly subsumed by political creative identity inventors to be the in-between space of otherness and therewith of liberation itself.
Okay, does it make sense? No?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
How?
Well, you decide to be in neither camp, so you're in the middle.
The excluded middle, you know, people, it's a bit like the squeezed middle. You know, there was a lot of talk about that. The sort of the squeezed middle class. Yeah? The excluded middle. It has quite a potent connotation that if you are somehow estranged from society, if you are an outcast, if you are a pervert, if you are subversive in some way, then you occupy this excluded middle territory. Then you occupy this groundless ground. But we will see in a minute that actually that's not what makes you the other. That's not what makes you different. Because the problem with this excluded middle is that it is still entirely logical, rational construct. And if you take your personal perversion or a transgression, or if you as an artist say that you occupy the excluded middle or this groundless ground, you still find yourself bound to the whole through this rational logic. You still find yourself basically using the same semiotic models that you kind of want to transgress and be opposed to. Does it make sense? Yeah?
Is she also kind of making a joke on Aristotle's law of the excluded level, which is what they are not A.
They not A. I think so, yeah, definitely. It is also there. I just wanted to say that you remember how there was a moment, I don't know if you remember, but there was a moment when, and I think I mentioned it to you in the past, when fetish suddenly became mainstream. And it happened, I think, roughly around the time when Madonna came out with this album and with these video clips. And suddenly fetish became trendy and fashionable. Yeah? So that is kind of how the limits of this transgressive mood that places itself in the excluded middle. So what I'm saying is that we need another strategy. If we want to be radical, it's not by making yourself the opposite or the negative. There has to be another way. That's why there is in Guattari task of art of the becoming, raison, and repetition. They are basically strategies that allow you to create change, but without requiring what? Without requiring the, it starts with the N. Good. Thank you. Yes. So, for Hegel, the only way to make change, the only way to change is negation. Negation, however, still places you in a rational framework to whatever it is you negate. So you bound to it, and you kind of didn't cut the umbilical cord. Okay. Deleuze and Guattari say we have another model. You can still make change. Just because we say negation is not productive, we're not suggesting that you should stagnate. You can still change. Here you have 3 new tools, yeah, as mentioned above. The refrain, rising, and becoming. They don't require negation. They operate not by opposing something, but by multiplying something. It's almost like, there are 2 ways to be an atheist. I think I also told you that as well, but I have a limited supply of examples, so they will have to be recycled. There are several ways to be an atheist. One of them is to say, there is no God. So you will come to me and say, there is God, believe, save yourself, or whatever, and I will say, well, actually, you know what? There is no God. So what position I'm taking here?
No position.
So that is negation. So how do you oppose? Then you base your atheism on negation. Yeah, negation becomes your move. You say there is no God. Fine. So negation becomes the ground of this discourse. Yeah. In this dialogue between the believer and the non-believer, the ground is negation. They both find themselves bound to this logic. None of them will be able to get out of this logic. Yeah? Because if one says A is and the other says A isn't, what the one thing they have in common is that they agree on the basic terms through which this conversation unfolds. Okay, is there a better move? It's like a chess game. Is there a better opening in this dialogue between the believer and the non-believer. So there is the famous Spinoza opening. It would be great to explain philosophy as chess. But the famous Spinoza opening is not to say, and Spinoza is the most famous atheist of them all, is not to say there is no God, is to say there's loads of God. God is everywhere. Everything is God. Everything is God. Of course there is God. You are God. This is God. This is God. God is everything. That is a fantastic atheist move because it completely dismantles the idea of God as this entity that sits above. Yeah? But without requiring the negation. Just by multiplying it. And what the believer will say, so no, you're going too far. There's not that much God. It makes, that's why, Spinoza's atheism to this day is so effective. If you don't believe me, or even if you do believe me, look for his book. It's called the Tractatus, the theological Tractatus, yes? Yeah, Tractatus Theologico-Politicus. It's fantastic. It's very easy read. It's horrible. But it's incredibly clever and very relevant somehow to today's politics. So this is, you see, that's how you build the opposition without actually requiring opposing terms. Yeah, through multiplicity. You might say that Spinoza's method is horizon. He basically says God is horizon. It's not a tree, it's not a deity, it's not an entity, it's everywhere. It's a rhythm. Okay. Right. I'm going to skip to the bottom of this page. Look, do you still have it in here to do a bit more?
I think I can manage a bit more.
Okay, let's do it.
So, of course.
Of course.
Of course, Deleuze, as well as Guattari, reject, and for good reason, the Hegelian dialectic, often demanding to rid philosophy, politics, science, and art of, as Foucault so eloquently put it, the old categories of the negative: law, limit, castration, lack, lacuna, which Western thought has so long held sacred as a form of power and an access to reality.
Okay, let's stop here for a second. Does it make sense? What do you hear? So, what does it say?
Deleuze and Guattari getting rid of all the old categories of limit, lack, and negativity and negation.
All these things, yeah, they're all basically negation in disguise or negation in different discourses. Negation in law, negation in as a limit, negation as castration in psychoanalysis, negation as lack in Lacan, lacunae. All of these terms, Foucault says, all these various forms of negation are also forms of power and control. Why they are also forms of power and control? He gets into this, Foucault gets into this in the introduction to Anti-Oedipus.